The famous British painter Joseph Mallord William Turner used to tell a story that's now become something of a legend. He set sail from the port of Harwich on a boat called the Ariel, just when a storm was brewing. And then he asked the sailors to lash him to the mast so that he could be soaked by the sea and whipped by the wind and rain. Now, why would anyone, let alone Britain's most famous artist, and a man in his 60s too, subject himself to this?
This was the picture that Turner painted. He wanted to transfer the overwhelming force of the sea and the storm straight onto the canvas. He was a man of extraordinary vision, light years ahead of his time, who pursued a quest to capture the immense power of nature in his art. And in that quest, no measure was too extreme and no experience too raw. Turner's vision has come to dominate our own. We see a stormy sky and call it Turneresque. And as a beautiful day draws to an end, we talk of Turner sunsets. Like the weather that he loved to paint, Turner has become a great British institution. But while his paintings have become priceless national treasures, the story of the man behind them has been largely forgotten. Turner was a Londoner, born in 1775. His story begins here, in Covent Garden, then a rough and ready part of town. He was the son of a barber. His father's shop was always busy with travelling salesmen, city gents, and colourful characters from the nearby theatres.
Americans think they're better than what we are. All trumpety puffed up. Before we know it, they'll be telling us what to do. It's true.
And in the middle of it all, his father.
Oh, William, you took your time with them windows. What you been up to?
Just looking.
And do you always know what you see, William?
He might not always know what he sees, but he can picture it. My son, sir, is going to be a painter.
This is the exact site where the barber shop was, and also the place where Turner was born. When he was still young, the family moved across the way here to number 26. Now, the whole area was strewn with rubbish and infested with rats, but it was also pulsating with life. There were theatres and taverns, there were brothels. There was also the massive fruit and veg market a few streets through. Everyone had something to buy and sell, and perhaps Turner realised that painting could become his ticket to another world.
You see, we sold one, William.
That was a 3 shillinger. That means you owe me 1 and 6, Dad. And an 8 for a cake.
Take care of the halfpennies. Always take care of the halfpennies.
Ah, the father and the son, tight as a spinster's arse. But, William, don't make haste to marry. You might end up with a shiner, like your pa.
Yeah. Ma walloped him like this.
Listen
Listen to me!
You go and sort out your gallery, William. I'll be finished soon. Then we can do some education. Words. Words.
I love my dad. He taught me the pride of hard work and thrift. He showed me love better than any woman I ever knew. I was his dream, and perhaps he was mine. It was all a very big dream we both had.
Vision, William. Vision.
Father and son were a strong team, one that grew stronger and closer with each passing year. And by selling those early efforts to his customers in the shop, he set the young Turner on the road. The boy would travel out of London to stay with relatives. When he was 10, he came here to Brentford. And tucked away in the local library is a fascinating glimpse of what he got up to on that visit.
The story goes that John Leese, who was a friend of the family that Turner was staying with in Brentford, thought that he might be artistically talented, and therefore, by suggesting that he coloured the plates in this book, it might encourage his talent. I think that's a slightly unsuitable one, actually, for a young lad.
Wonderful architectural detail there.
Oh, yes, a bit of everything in that one. And then, after that, we get into the pictures which the rest of the book is full of. Castles, abbeys, ruins.
Does Turner get paid, though? Because I have a theory that Turner's always a bit of a businessman,
yes,
even from an early age.
Turner is said to have been paid twopence a plate for colouring them in.
I know that, you know, we shouldn't judge a 10 or 11-year-old too harshly, but just occasionally he makes a smudge or two,
Well,
doesn't he?
yes, there are one or two places where he's been a bit too quick, perhaps, and gone over the edge. Perhaps he was trying to do several in one day.
Colouring in the pictures doubtless whiled away the hours, and they seem to have made an impression on the young Turner. In a few years, he would visit and paint many of these places for himself. Away from the dark grime of London, this must have seemed like heaven. But there was a tragic reason for the trip. Like hundreds of children, Turner's little sister, Mary Ann, paid the price of living amidst the stinking hubbub of the city. Just a few days before her 5th birthday, she died. Back home, things got worse. Turner's mother had always been temperamental, but losing her daughter was perhaps the final straw.
Listen to me. Listen.
I love you, I love you, Mary. I love you.
Listen to me.
I hear you, Mary.
I will be heard.
I hear you.
I will be heard.
All right.
My mother had an unquenchable storm inside her. I suppose it became mine too. Chaos, trouble, convulsions, they always come. It's nature. All her moods are extreme.
As his mother's health deteriorated, Turner spent more and more time with relatives. His next escape was to Margate, on the Kent coast. He occupied his time sketching and painting, and produced a series of watercolours. Remember that Turner was away from his parents and their unhappy home, on his own, and producing confident and accomplished work, untutored, and still only 10 years old. By the time Turner was in his teens, it seemed he'd begun a personal quest to grasp every detail of the visual world around him. Later, he recalled how he'd lie on his back for hours, staring at the clouds, training his eye, fine-tuning his vision. And then he'd paint studies of the sky and sell them to other artists, ever the entrepreneur. And once again, his father's barber's shop played a helping hand. Amongst the customers were architects, who not only employed him, giving him valuable drawing experience, but also encouraged him to get a formal artist's training. Just a stone's throw from the barber's is Somerset House. Today it offers a variety of attractions. You can come to study, to look at paintings, or in winter, to skate. For Turner, though, it was important for just one reason.
This building was the place to be for a young artist in the late 18th century because it housed the Royal Academy of Arts. And if painting was your chosen profession, the Royal Academy schools were the best place to learn. And if you became elected as a full member of the Academy, doors were opened onto a world of influential patrons and wealthy collectors. And for Turner, the Academy would become his home from home, his exhibition space and showroom, his passport to patronage, and his own private club.
In 1789, Turner was admitted into the Royal Academy School at the age of 14. He began to learn his craft, drawing from sculpture and from life, as well as copying the work of his elders and the old masters. Even then, he was driven. In a few prolific years, he made a massive leap from studies like this, his first work to be shown at the Academy, to this refined, subtle, and acutely observed image of Tintern Abbey in Monmouthshire. Being a skilled watercolourist was one thing, but major recognition came from an artist's ability to handle oil paint. It was a medium that Turner was determined to master, and this, his first known attempt, was astounding.
This is a spectacular picture for someone who's just 21. The result of a summertime tour here to the Isle of Wight, where Turner filled up his sketchbooks and fired up his imagination. Now, most of the books I've read on Turner claim that the scene depicted is of the island's most celebrated landmark, the Needles.
Whenever Turner went on a trip, he'd cover plenty of ground, and this one was no exception. Looking through the sketchbook, it seems that he must have walked around the whole island. But there's something missing. There's page after page of seascape and coastline, some inland views as well, but no hint of that famous landmark, the Needles.
Having toured the island, I'm convinced that it's not the Needles in Turner's picture. I think this is the place, Freshwater Bay. Look at the headlands and the rocks, and we know since Turner's time, 2 of them have crashed into the sea, and also this was and still is a place where fishermen launch their boats out to sea. But what makes this painting so amazing is the drama that Turner brings to it, and he creates a sense of theatre by setting the whole scene at night time. Now, when you look at the picture, the first thing you notice is light, and there are 2 sources: the full moon in the sky, and then the warm glow of the fisherman's lamp. But look a little longer and a little deeper, and you realise that the strongest sensation that Turner conveys is the brooding but terrifying power of the sea, which threatens to rear up and obliterate the fishermen and their boats at any second. I love this picture, it's always been one of my favourite Turners. But there is a flaw. Look at the moon, and then look at the clouds. What are they doing going behind the moon? But perhaps we can forgive a young artist that tiny error.
Fisherman at Sea was shown at the Royal Academy in 1796. It sold for £10, just over £500 today. But soon his prices will be much higher, through a combination of originality, hard work and travel. By now, Turner was both artist and business traveller. This is a page from one of his sketchbooks listing the clothes he'd take with him on a tour.
Right, first up, 3 coats. That's the ones. 4 waistcoats, white. And 6 shirts. 6 pairs of cotton stockings, 2 pairs of silk stockings, 8 cravats, and 3 pocket handkerchiefs. 5 pairs of breeches, 4 under waistcoats, and finally 3 pairs of boots. Oh, and don't forget the hat. Thank you. Turner's tours weren't just about sketching, they were also about networking, keeping up with old clients and making new contacts.
When he was 23, he came here to North Wales.
Turner took every opportunity to escape the grime of London, and through his frequent tours, he documented Britain. Turner was a vigorous traveller. Plunging himself headfirst into the elements was physically hard work, and he thought nothing of walking up to 25 miles a day. By travelling and drawing and sketching, Turner became a prototype tourist who helped to build up a picture of Britain and who helped forge a national identity.
Turner rarely, if ever, painted when he was on the road. He thought it was too time-consuming. Instead, he sketched rapidly and then completed in oil or watercolour back in his studio in London. The 1798 tour was a typically packed itinerary. He explored the Wye and Taff valleys before going to Cardiff. Then he headed north along the coast with numerous stop-offs before arriving here in Snowdonia.
If we compare Turner's travel with that of his contemporary John Constable, who was born the year after Turner, it's extraordinary. Constable was born in Suffolk, moved to London, but travelled no further afield than Brighton and Salisbury. Turner, though, mapped the length and breadth of the country and beyond. So it started in 1792 with South Wales, then 1795, Isle of Wight, 1797, the north of England, 1798, North Wales, 1801, Scotland, 1802, Europe, first time, 1811.
Turner made nearly 60 tours across Britain and the continent through his lifetime. Another stop on that 1798 tour was here in Carnarvon, where he made studies of the castle. His approach to painting became more radical. Turner was breaking down the barriers between oil and watercolour, strongly evident in paintings like Carnarvon Castle.
Well, by 1799, when Turner exhibits this wonderful watercolour of Carnarvon Castle, he'd achieved the ability to attain an incredible richness and depth of tone, which is why the Carnarvon Castle looks very much like an oil painting.
What do we mean by tone here?
Well, tone is the range of colour from light to dark. Turner's ability to control tones was really quite amazing. And, for example, in this superb early watercolour of Tom Tower, we can see a vast range of different tones, a different tone for each slab of masonry. Now, this presented Turner with a technical problem. In order to get this range of tones, he could have used a palette like this, in which he had maybe 50 different colours. But it would have meant that he'd have been constantly having to clean off his brush or have a vast number of brushes for each different tone to stop them from corrupting each other, to keep the tones pure. But he didn't do that. Instead, what he did was to have a palette like this, in which he had a single colour, a single tone, and put it at different places in the composition. And then having done that, he would pick up his palette and move on to the next watercolour and put in the same tone that he had mixed up on his palette there, and so on all the way around a room filled with sheets of paper. And by the time he got back to the beginning, the first sheet would have dried, and he could then slightly darken his palette to add the next tone down the tonal scale from light to dark, pretty much as one puts different shapes within a jigsaw puzzle. This tonal control that Turner was learning in the 1790s would stand him in enormously good stead. By the end of his career, Turner had the ability to minutely differentiate one tone from another in a way that's never been rivalled anywhere in the history of art.
The few years between the painting of Tom Tower and Carnarvon Castle marked the transition from aspiration to success. This picture fetched 40 guineas, over £2,000 today, and his oils were commanding even higher prices and acclaim. Turner was a rising star, doing nicely, and still only 23. This was when he painted his only adult self-portrait. We see someone full of confidence and perhaps with a hint of arrogance, a handsome young man. And by painting himself face on and from the chest upwards, he passed lightly over the features he didn't like about himself. His nose, his tendency towards portliness, and a noticeable lack of inches. And although the painting marks Turner's growing self-esteem, one incident in 1799 put his own work into perspective. Turner usually kept his emotions to himself, but when he saw this picture, he was reduced to tears. Now, why would an image from the Bible of the embarkation of the Queen of Sheba, painted by the French artist Claude Lorraine, have such an impact? Well, in effect, Turner sees the light. As you can see, Claude is a great painter of sunlight and its dazzling effects rippling across the water and playing on the architecture on either side. And Turner is bowled over with admiration, but he also realises that as a young artist, he's got a long way to go. His mother's mental health had steadily worsened, and in 1800, she was committed to an asylum. The tragedy drew Turner and his father even closer. They became the family firm, father joining son in new premises that Turner had taken on a year earlier.
Turner moved here to Harley Street, a fashionable, elegant part of town, where he intended not only to live, but also to open his own gallery. Now, he still continued to show his work at the Royal Academy, but there he faced stiff competition, with his paintings vying with hundreds of others on the same wall. Here, though, he could control totally the way his work was seen.
There was something else new in Turner's life: love. He'd grown close to a widower called Sarah Danby. She already had 4 children when she met Turner.
Children!
No, William.
What a treat, being able to look through these minute sketchbooks. And what I see are a series of affectionate and intimate drawings. And I'm sure a Sarah Danby's here. And in fact, things become increasingly erotic. But it's as if I've been given access to a private world that Turner didn't really want any of us to see. And that mirrors his relationship with Sarah. They had 2 daughters, Georgina and Evelina. And yet Turner never publicly acknowledged either the daughters or their mother.
With Sarah discreetly raising their young children and his father minding the gallery, Turner now wanted to strengthen his position at the Royal Academy. He lobbied for election as Professor of Perspective, and in 1807 he took up the post. One of his new responsibilities was to give lectures.
Bear with me.
Turner's fluency with the paintbrush wasn't matched by his way with words.
Purity of conception, as it were.
I had to... Here. Where is it? Never mind, turn up. All artists must go back to the first chaos of the world, or to that state of things when waters were separated from dry land and light from darkness.
He was tongue-tied. The lectures were incoherent and often poorly attended.
Had been seen on the face of the earth.
But one who did come often was the Academy librarian. He was stone deaf, but he told a friend, "There's so much to see at Turner's lectures, much that I delight in seeing, though I can't hear him."
Yes. Where's that painting? Hold that higher. So higher, please. Still. You can see now the arrangement gives the associative feelings of force. This is eruptive expanding. In form, an expression of hope, and we must all work in hope. Eruptive expanding. And that's it.
Turner persevered with the lectures for years, although he never fully mastered them. But his horizons were expanding, thanks to a key event in 1815. For most of his adult life, England had been at war with France. But when Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, Turner was free to travel south through Europe. The optical dazzle of the Southern Light changed Turner and his art forever.
Turner quickly became a seasoned European traveller, but he didn't even reach the most spectacular city on the continent until his third trip. But once he arrived here in Venice, Turner was captivated by the ghostly beauty of the place and its constantly changing patterns of light. And so he was inspired to make Europe's most exotic city shimmer and sparkle as never before.
But it wasn't just the incandescent beauty of Venice that transfixed Turner. The city brought out his competitive spirit. Not content with being one of Britain's foremost artists, he wanted to forge an international reputation. Many great artists had painted Venice before him, but he wanted to depict the architecture, the light, the people, the water, the whole place, better and more brilliantly than anyone else. In effect, he was saying to the old masters, anything you can do, I can do better. Turner came to Venice 3 times in all. The results of his first visit in 1819 were a few simple yet stunningly beautiful watercolours.
For Turner, Venice was a floating city, and in no medium did Turner express this better than in watercolour, because watercolour is, of course, intrinsically a floating medium. And to that end, he'd take whole sheets of paper and put them into a bucket of water so as to totally wet the surface. He would have buckets of yellow water, which he would then put the whole sheet into, take it out and hang it up on a clothesline to dry. Blue watercolour, red watercolour.
How does he use these wetted watercolour papers?
Well, he'll take a sheet of paper, which might be yellow to start with. And then he'll take a sponge or a brush, add some red, brush in some blue.
Am I being a bit poetic here, or is there in fact a lagoon emerging from there?
Well, I think there should be a lagoon emerging from there, if we had a little gondola. And there are dozens of watercolours like this in the Turner bequest. in a very, very primary state, using them as a way of sparking his imagination. And I mean, he could also take the watercolour and put it back in the water. And look how much more subtle that looks.
Absolutely, it becomes ghostly. So it's a quick medium, but it means that he can be experimental and radical and, in fact, take risks.
Oh, yeah. Turner's constantly having this dialogue between the paper, the pigment, and the water. The three of them are totally feeding into each other and into his imagination and into his sense of vision and pushing the work further and further down the line towards what we think of as a masterpiece.
From those first watercolours through to his late oils, Venice haunted Turner's imagination, and it became rare for him to submit paintings for an exhibition without there being a Venetian canvas among them. In 1827, Turner was 52 and in his prime. Now he had an international reputation. Turner and his paintings were more popular than ever in England, and he became something of a celebrity. Wealthy patrons welcomed him into their houses. Some of these had a tendency towards eccentricity, which matched Turner's own somewhat maverick behaviour. One such patron was Lord Egremont. Said to have fathered 43 illegitimate children, he entertained in flamboyant style at his country home, Petworth House, in Sussex. Here Turner could come and go when he wanted. He could fish and paint and do as he pleased. He was even given his own room to work in. It was a relaxed household, perhaps even a little decadent. From his Petworth sketches, it seems that Turner was on hand to record many intimate moments. He was also very much part of Petworth's social whirl.
That's him.
When does he paint?
God knows. He's either fishing or drinking during the daytime.
And is he a gentleman?
See for yourself. Georgina, this is Mr. Turner.
Sorry.
Turner is often portrayed and described as being uncouth, awkward and self-centred. Perhaps he was.
Perhaps not a gentleman. And certainly not charming.
But he was also a man of great compassion and tenderness, not to mention a romantic spirit.
It's 5:30. I rise early. I work until the house starts to awaken. I didn't mean to scare you. I have something for you. Open it, please. Yeah, an apology for my clumsiness.
It's beautiful.
As well as his numerous sketches of life inside the house, Turner made a series of paintings depicting stunning sunsets at Petworth. 3 of these are now being restored at Tate Britain.
Joyce, these paintings are all from Petworth. They look great to my eye. They're out of their frames, which is a real treat. It's a fantastic opportunity to look at Turner close up. So what kind of shape are they in?
They're in pretty good condition. However, we're seeing them through a very yellow varnish. Varnishes turn yellow in about a generation. We have to try and picture how they looked when that varnish was new. And we can get an idea if you look at it through a blue filter and get some of that effect.
Now that really makes a huge difference. It gives the painting a lot more depth and there's a greater contrast and also more colour of blues and pinks and so on.
Looking at a Turner this close, you can see the range and delicacy of his use of materials.
This is interesting because it's been stabbed in particularly thick here on the reflection, but here it looks like it's been thin. Is that with turpentine?
It didn't work terribly well thinning the paint, but you could add materials called McGilps, made from oil and mastic varnish. This is one of the bottles from Turner's studio.
This is Turner's actual bottle.
Looked like this. It's Turner's actual bottle. You mix it in with the paint, and then it was like painting with mayonnaise. It was lovely stuff to use.
So does that mean that the quality of the paint itself, as we now look at it, is pretty well preserved, or is this still an era where paints are going to crack and not look so good?
Well, the McGilps did crack, and when we look at some of the brown areas, we see a fine network of cracks.
The deer's particularly cracked, isn't it?
However, this painting is not in bad condition, partly because it got away from Turner's studio and ended up in Petworth.
Well, what did Turner do then that meant that the works that he kept in his studio were so bad or in such bad condition?
Well, Turner's studio was cold and damp and the rain came in, and this one shows the rain damage.
Wow, that's taken quite a hammering, actually. It's funny how you can see the raindrops, but because it's Turner, there's a feeling that he's experimenting with some kind of drip or dribble technique. Has this had to be heavily restored?
It has been restored. Turner also used good quality paper. He had to because of the way he worked. The paper had to be strong enough to withstand that, so it could stand the rain too.
So in a sense, he's got an eye on posterity because he's using really good quality materials, and for that reason it'll stand the test of time.
And the other things he did to them. For example, he used one canvas as a cat flap. It was blocking the window, possibly even a broken window, and there was a large tear in it. That's now been restored too.
Did he allow the cats to mingle around the studio to the extent that you would find cat fur on the surfaces of works?
I haven't found cat hair, but I have found some paw prints.
Some paw prints?
Come and look at this.
I see no paw prints. What are we looking at here?
This is one of the drawings for his perspective lectures. And when we look at the back, we could see the paw prints.
That is quite amazing.
The gallery where Turner's cats ran wild has long since gone, but some of the paints, palettes and paraphernalia still survive at the Tate. As Turner travelled further afield, the gallery, looked after by Sarah Danby's niece and Turner's ageing father, became ramshackle and chaotic. And when Turner was there, his techniques became chaotic and eccentric. Trying to capture ideas and effects as quickly as he could, his paintings often paid the price. He mixed oils with watercolours, resins with paints, pigments faded, varnishes cracked, restorers had to be called in. Constable rather unkindly said, much of his best work is swept off the carpet by the maid. But Turner could afford to be carefree. His paintings were in great demand, and he was, in his own words, the great lion of the day. And once a year, here at the Royal Academy, he turned the routine of preparing for an exhibition into a remarkable display of virtuoso brilliance.
In the days leading up to the annual exhibition, Academy members were allowed to complete their pictures in the gallery itself. And these sessions were known as the Varnishing Days. Now, this is the room in which the exhibitions were staged, recreated to look exactly as it would have done in Turner's day, with pictures crammed in and piled high up the walls.
The prized position was at eye level, on the line, and Turner was on the hanging committee to ensure that his paintings took pride of place.
Here amongst colleagues and friends, Turner was in his element. He'd pinch paint from the palettes of other artists. He'd spit onto the surface of his pictures. He'd rub mysterious brown powders into the surface of the canvas. On one occasion, he wanted the image of a dog in the middle of a canvas to draw the eye in. But instead of painting it as usual, he cut the image of a dog out in paper and stuck it onto the picture.
One year, by chance, a Turner was placed next to a painting by one of his great rivals, Constable, and the Constable was causing quite a stir.
The reds are the key. The vermilion, it gives a vigour to it. The whole thing's alive.
The Constable's picture was breathtaking. It was a pageant of rich, powerful colour and drew everyone's attention. By contrast, Turner's painting was cold, grey, and frankly, a little dull. But this was Turner's crowning glory. This was his defining moment, his knockout punch. And yet here was his rival taking centre stage. Constable's use of red was brilliantly subtle. In layer upon layer of intricate detail, Constable had painstakingly delineated each soldier's uniform. Turner's use of red was brilliantly unsubtle. Constable was indignant.
Turner has been here and fired a gun.
Extraordinary. It's like red hot coal.
A red-hot coal in the middle of a cold grey sea. Hardly feasible. It was a blob. Scarlet sniper.
And Turner wasn't finished yet. Later, he returned to fashion his red blob into an integral part of the painting.
Ah! It's a boy. Ingenious. Do you see? It's a boy.
Oh, yes, it's a boy. Well, of course it's a boy now, but before it...
It wasn't. Ingenious.
There was a part of Turner that was given to such flamboyant and eccentric displays. Yet there was another, quieter, more profound and visionary side to his nature. In the same year as he painted this, he also painted Death on a Pale Horse. It's one of the darkest paintings imaginable. Turner painted it just after the death of his dearest friend.
It's 7 and 6, sir.
7 and 6, you say?
7 and 6 is good work.
It's fair work. It's fair to middling.
William Turner had devoted his life to his son's career. He'd been his best friend, his assistant, his rock.
Dad. Look after the Ha'pennies, eh, Dad? Who's going to tell me that now?
Perhaps looking for comfort and reassurance, he returned to Margate, his childhood haunt. Here, he grew close to a woman called Sophia Booth, the owner of the house where he lodged. They stayed together for the rest of his life, but Turner again wanted to keep the relationship a secret. So he adopted an alter ego.
The Booths of Margate. A handsome couple. Affectionate. No, Admiral Puggy Booth.
Meeting Sophia coupled with the loss of his father might have thrown Turner off course. Instead, in the next few years, he painted the pictures that have made him an immortal figure.
It might not be that spectacular to look at, but this is an extraordinary fragment of history, because this altar chair is made from the timbers of a ship that fought heroically alongside Nelson's flagship, HMS Victory, at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. 33 years later, though, it was sold off for scrap. The name of this ship? The Fighting Temeraire.
There's a story that while returning along the Thames from Margate, Turner saw the old Temeraire being towed to the breaker's yard. The legend's probably a myth, but the story of the Temeraire's end became the subject of Turner's best-loved work.
This is a fantastic example of Turner at the height of his powers, and it's a picture full of contrast. On the right-hand side, there's the golden glow of the sun, orb like sinking down below the horizon. And on the left-hand side, there's the watery light of the moon in its ascendancy. And that, of course, mirrors the central image of the picture. This squat, energised little tug, belching out fire and soot, pulling something 10 times its size, the dignified, ghostly hulk of the Temeraire itself, being towed to its death at the breaker's yard.
The critics were ecstatic. There's something which affects us almost as deeply as the decay of a noble human being, wrote one. Perhaps the most wonderful of all the works of the greatest master of the age, said another. In the painting, Turner leaves us with one final thought. If the Temeraire is being pulled towards London, then we must be looking east. And that's where the sun is setting. As if, for Turner, the world has gone mad.
Just imagine what this would have been like for Turner. Before the invention of the steam engine, the fastest way of getting around was on horseback. But suddenly a new way of experiencing and seeing the world was possible. So Turner jumps on a steam train, it's raining just like it is today, and he sticks his head out the window and sees a world racing past in blurred motion.
This is probably Turner's most radical painting. It shows the Great Western Railway line on Brunel's recently built bridge over the Thames at Maidenhead. But look again, and you'll see that he's anchored this modern vision in the 4 elements as old as time itself. The canvas is awash. Water dominates the painting. The train is emerging from a storm, and the train is driven by steam. The steam is made from the fire in the engine heating the water. And the train thunders into the wind, creating a storm all of its own. Down below there are people, rooted to the earth, onlookers watching as this modern wonder flashes past. The natural world has been harnessed, but will man be able totally to overcome nature? In one tiny detail, Turner gives us the answer. A little hare races ahead of the train. Could the hare be too fast for this man-made beast? Will nature win out? No. One more glimpse at the 3 puffs of smoke tell us that the little hare better jump out of the way before he's gobbled up by the big bad train. Rain, steam and speed was Turner's emphatic response to the new world. Technology touched everyone. Even painters now faced new competition, not least with the development of the camera. Turner was spellbound. Joseph Myle, a pioneering photographer, had set up shop in London, and Turner, still pretending to be someone else, became a frequent visitor.
I'm sorry, the door was open. I just wandered in.
My name's Mail.
Yes, of course it is. And I'm Booth, Mr. Booth.
Oh, but I thought...
I've come because I've heard about your work.
You've heard of my work?
Yes, what you've been doing with the daguerreotype. Well, you've refined it. Tell me, do you mind? Is this the future? You think this grinding lens, splitting light, this photographic method?
Well, yes.
So these artists will be moving around the country with just a box, like a tinker, huh? Instead of a portfolio under their arm.
No. I mean, some artists are almost visionary. It's different. May I make a picture of you?
Why?
Because you have an interesting face. Because I want to.
Oh, yes, of course.
Perfect. And be still. Come on, Mr. Booth.
As the real world became more mechanical, Turner was taking stock of his own. He'd begun to buy back paintings. For sun rising through vapour, He paid 490 guineas, well over £20,000 in today's money. And his new works were darker, strange, and visionary. As if looking back on his life, he began to revisit places he'd seen and painted as a young man. One location held a special place in Turner's affections: Norham Castle, on the banks of the River Tweed in Northumberland.
Turner made his first sketch of Norham Castle in 1797, and he came back here in the 1830s and doffed his hat to the place, because after the first completed image of the castle, he'd never been short of work. From that day to this, he explained, I've had as much to do as my hands could execute. But in the late great image of the castle, the emphasis has changed, and instead of focusing on the building and the surrounding landscape, the stress is centrally on the effects of the rising sun.
It's almost as if the castle is floating in the mist. Where once he was making watercolours look like oils, now Turner is doing the opposite. Eric Shanes has begun a version of Norham Castle to get to the heart of Turner's techniques in his later years.
Well, I think he was using, we know, a watercolour stroke oil painting type of medium, which had come on the market fairly recently. And there are areas in the Turner where one can see quite clearly very, very thin washes which suggest that they were made with this kind of medium, if not even with watercolour itself. I mean, as everybody knows, you can't mix oil and water, but there are these runnels of colour here which look very much like they've been made with watercolour, because you've got these blue ridges right at the edge of each trickle of colour. And that's exactly what happens with watercolour. It doesn't happen with oil paint. He's using the whole variety, the whole gamut of different paint applications at his disposal. You can see the way he's put it on very thickly with a palette knife. I mean, he's quite clearly used a palette knife and pulled the knife off the surface. He's applied the paint by smearing it. He's undoubtedly used his fingers to rub it. He's used the wooden end of the brush to scratch marks out down here, and the result of that is to make the eye blinded with the brilliance of the light that he's projecting through the image.
Is this the natural culmination of what he's done all his life, or is he suddenly taken a radical departure?
No, I think it is the natural culmination of everything that had come before. Now, of course, Turner's living by this time, 1845, 48, in an age of fantastically meticulous Victorian realism and representation. And then people see paintings like this, and they think that Turner's taken leave of his senses. Queen Victoria thought that Turner was completely mad.
People had been thinking he was mad for years. He was out on a limb and was subsequently ridiculed. It looks like a lady getting out of a large mustard pot, someone said about a rare portrait. The poet Wordsworth said, it looks to me as if the painter had indulged in raw liver. The critics looked at Juliet and her nurse and asked what Juliet was doing in Venice. Shouldn't she be in Verona? But the cruelest words were saved for that most breathtaking of paintings. Snowstorm, the painting that launched the legend that he lashed himself to a mast, was simply too much for most people to take. After it was exhibited, they tore into him. One said, this gentleman has on former occasions chosen to paint with cream, chocolate, egg and jelly. Here, he uses the whole array of kitchen stuff. Most famously, the painting was dismissed as soapsuds and whitewash.
Soapsuds and whitewash, soapsuds and whitewash, soapsuds and whitewash, soapsuds and whitewash.
William!
I will be heard!
Vision, vision, William. Vision, vision.
The man who'd been master of his age continued to paint and exhibit to the last. But his visions of light and dark, death and angels, now only seem to perplex the public. He died in a house next to his beloved River Thames at the age of 76. In his will, he bequeathed a vast collection of his works to the nation. Today, they're housed in the Claw Gallery at Tate Britain. A bequest of over 100 finished paintings, some 200 unfinished paintings, and more than 19,000 sketches, drawings, and watercolours. The bequest would have contained even more items, but for an extraordinary event that took place shortly after Turner's death. John Ruskin, the most influential art critic of his day, and long since one of Turner's most fervent admirers, was given the mammoth task of sorting through the collection. As he worked through the endless sketchbooks, drawings and paintings, he unearthed one final astonishing secret, a secret he felt would have shaken the Victorian establishment in Britain to the core. In his last years, Turner used to go down to the docks. There in the pubs, he'd meet and sketch prostitutes. In the bequest, there were hundreds of these amazingly graphic drawings. Fearing that this would cause a scandal and ruin the reputation of Britain's greatest painter, Ruskin took it upon himself to destroy the secret bequest. There was one special clause in Turner's will that was implemented soon after his death. In the centre of London, at the National Gallery, in a small octagonal room, next to the Claude Lorraine painting that made Turner cry all those years ago, hangs Turner's Dido building Carthage. It was Turner's wish that the two paintings be displayed side by side, as if to show that he felt worthy of comparison. Today, though, Turner stands above those comparisons and is indisputably revered as one of the masters of Western art.
Six Music's Matt Everett interviews major artists about the pivotal moments and songs that shaped their lives and careers. Listen now to The First Time with Matt Everett on BBC Sounds.